Thank you, Itamar. We now have about half an hour of the panel discussing with you in the audience the issues that were raised this afternoon. First of all, I would like to ask the panelists whether they would like to react to each other. And if not, I see this sort of, I saw your movement, Professor Shamir. And so let me ask the audience if they want to raise questions, because I have some, but I would give preference to the audience. I see someone in the back. I guess you will present yourself.
On the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but of course we also can hear you. We can. All right.
תישאר שם, תישאר שם, תישאר שם. כן.
All right. Thank you very much. My name is Tal Harris. We are working in the One Voice movement that works exclusively on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which obviously is also influenced by the regional aspect. And going back to the September declaration or the September application for UN membership that is expected, I am afraid that while the Israeli discourse and the American discourse identifies all the risks inherent in this unilateral course, and we identify them also in favor of bilateralism, all the responses go only for the blocking of September, meaning diplomatic pressure that is put on the quality states, as they're called, not to accept September in the UN, and all sorts of unilateral actions that are proposed by some Likud ministers to annex unilaterally.
Question, please.
The question is, what will happen if September is successfully rejected? Because what will happen on the Palestinian leadership level and what will happen in the Palestinian street when all hopes are out there for September, and maybe this is what keeps the Palestinian street and leadership contained in this time of turmoil.
Thank you. Ambassador Wisner, would you like to start?
I'd be happy to. Is the microphone carrying? Thanks. I'd be happy to react, and I hope both Shimon and Itamar will as well. Actually, from my point of view, I see it slightly differently. I believe that the resolution will arrive in the General Assembly in September, and given current conditions, it will pass, and it will pass overwhelmingly. I say that just listening around the United Nations. Every time I turn around, one permanent representative or another, even without instructions, announces that he will be voting in favor of this resolution. The issue to me, therefore, is, do you want to spend valuable diplomatic capital trying to stop this event? Because as I sit back and look at it, from my perspective, and I'd like to put myself in your shoes, but you're in a better situation to do that. This is a non-event. This is not going to produce a state. It will produce some complexity, but it's not a realistic way of looking at the problem. A nation without a capital, without borders, without the attributes is a non-factor. What I think we ought to be trying to do is come up with an alternative narrative, something else that you can focus on, so this issue of a UN resolution in a Palestinian state doesn't become the dominant narrative. Now, what Itamar said at the very end, there are a range of choices available to the United States and Israel to show that we are addressing the reality of the future. There are a wide range of choices. I would like to think we could get our minds around those choices rather than spend our capital trying to defeat something that's likely to go through and whose substance at the end of the day is not highly significant.
I would like to add to this that if we can prevent a majority of 200 by removing 50 states, mostly European, those which follow the pattern of voting of the EU, which includes Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Japan, what I call the political weight in the UN General Assembly, then it has a different significance. This resolution, which I agree with you, it will pass, just because there is a sort of the automatic majority. But the question is whether we can remove the 50 states from, if we come up, as you rightly say, and Itamar said, if we come up in the next few weeks with a sort of a joint strategy, U.S. and Israel. Please, Shimon.
Well, I agree with Ambassador Wisner that the importance of this expected resolution in the General Assembly has been exaggerated. I wouldn't go so far as to call it a non-event because the symbolic significance of this cannot be minimized. It will affect the atmosphere in the Israeli-Palestinian arena, perhaps in the whole region. But let us remember that the General Assembly has already expressed support for a Palestinian state. This is not something which is entirely new. The General Assembly also cannot even accept the Palestinians into the United Nations because this depends on the recommendation by the Security Council, which I don't believe will come. So the practical implications are quite limited. But on the other hand, as far as the Israelis, the Israeli preparations for such a development are concerned, sitting back and doing nothing is something that is not really in the best interest of Israel. There was talk in Israel about a second Bar Ilan speech by the Prime Minister. Certain initiatives were discussed and still are being discussed. But sit back and do nothing and just expect this resolution from the General Assembly to fall like rain on the Israeli scene, I think this is not the best way to deal with this.
Professor Rabinowitz, you pass. Ran Lerman, please.
Ambassador Wisner, you mentioned the Marshall Plan in a somewhat critical manner. Now, obviously, those who raised this concept, including the Prime Minister and including 3 months ago the Foreign Minister of Italy, are not unaware of certain budgetary constraints both in the United States and Europe. On the other hand, clearly, the future of Egypt cannot be taken care of by small steps, given the magnitude of the challenge. This is a country whose social and economic stability is vital and whose challenges are immense. And so there needs to be something more than small steps here and there, perhaps in the corporate world with some backing at the governmental level to at least inspire some confidence in the future of the new democracies in the Middle East if they are to be stabilized and not fall into the hands of Islamists or others who may exploit the existing misery.
If I may, Ambassador Wisner, add as a trailer to this question, I think that this is something which is very clearly missing. A strategy which is developed by the U.S., the EU, being adjacent geographically to the region more than the U.S., the World Bank, the IMF, the OECD, all of these organizations are not showing even the beginning of the development of such a strategy. with all, as Eran said, the constraints, the known constraints about the situation of the euro, the financial, generally speaking, the financial situation of both the United States and the EU, but there's a lack of any initiative in this respect.
Right. Well, is this carrying or not? Exactly. No. Yeah, it's an important issue, but I think we have to start answering it by asking ourselves, what's the problem? I believe the problem is not one that can be addressed by the mobilization of a large capital fund. Right now, if you go to Egypt, and it's not unique, the banks are awash in liquidity. It's not an issue, is there money available? The issue is there a capacity to invest? At the moment, with as much political uncertainty, as much lack of clarity as to what national economic policy will be, no one wants to take the money that's available out of the bank and put it to work inside the economy. No Saudi investor is going to come forward in this environment and put money at risk. So the starting point is not money. The starting point is what is the environment and what will the economic policies be. Now, obviously, with an extremely weak transitional government, all these questions can't be answered. But I suggested in the course of my remarks, there are behind those questions some even deeper ones that have to be thought through and worked out. You cannot simply replace one rentier system with another. You cannot end up by going back to the state and saying the state will run the economy and distribute subsidies. There's going to have to be a way forward that permits some degree of initiative, sharing in the society. And at the moment, no one in Egypt, as one example, sees their way through to a new set of economic strategies. So what is important right now? What needs to be done right now? And that is to make certain that the immediate economic environment does not deteriorate so that it becomes an additional cause of political turbulence. You need to make certain there's enough money in the system to provide liquidity, that the central bank doesn't run out of currency so that it can't finance ordinary, urgent imports. Second, you better be sure that the granaries have enough wheat in them so that there isn't a bread shortage and the price of bread runs up. In both of those examples, I think we can take short-term measures, but we have to be precise as to what the issue is. Then, as a new government comes in, matters hopefully over the next couple of years settle down, policies emerge, confidence in the environment takes place, then you could start talking about not Marshall plans, but serious proposals to get to the development of the society and give people longer-term hope. But I believe you'd miss the subject right now. You'd miss the important objective of keeping some degree of order and stability, not allowing your political environment, if you don't address the short-term needs and take the longer-term ones and put them a little bit down the road, address them when you get there. When you get there, I honestly believe that the right model today is not a massive capital infusion of governments and public institutions, but it's much more an interesting combination of private capital and government capital and I use the term in my remarks of an investment banker that catalyzes, brings together other sorts of funds for the great investments, the new valleys in Egypt, other development projects in health, education. These are all possibilities, but honestly, for the moment, concentrate on what needs to be done urgently.
Thank you. questions. Please.
Natan Nessel, Ambassador Wisner, you were talking about the U.S. red lines. You didn't mention the Hamas. What is the U.S. administration attitude toward the Hamas inclusion in the process?
Well, you're absolutely right that I did not mention all red lines. I had some respect that I would overspeak my piece. There are a number of American red lines, of which many we share with you. I mentioned the peace treaties. I did so particularly because that is right at the front burner today with moves in Egypt to open the border, to approach the Hamas issue, and then voices from the Muslim Brothers in the background that maybe the treaty ought to be looked at, maybe the Egyptian army ought to be repositioned. These are all anathemas to me because they go to the heart of the most important security understandings. I mentioned only that one. I also didn't mention my preoccupations with Iran and how to deal with Iran. Now, having said that, I have several reactions to your remarks. I look at the Hamas development with the Palestinian Authority. I look at it with some caution. If the result is a radicalized Palestinian regime, then obviously a red line has been crossed. But I'd like to suggest we are in very early days. We don't know what the outcome will be in the jockeying between the two sides. There are huge differences of opinion between Ramallah and Gaza. Huge. Is this all going to settle down? Do we want to put ourselves in the position of being the lightning rod? Is it not smarter to let them begin to sort their way forward, provided that we, and by we I mean we and you, make it clear what our red lines are? Terror, imprisonment of Gilad, of your soldier, the Shalit, the many offensive, the acts of aggression, the rocket fire, these things are impermissible. I can state those, but do we want to attack the alliance which stands on very uncertain legs? Is it wise to move in that manner right now? After all, if you believe one day, as I do, that there should be peace and understanding between Israel and the Palestinians, one day under some circumstance you're going to need a Palestinian partner. This is not a partner yet, but do you want to break it apart before it even starts? I would hold back a bit, not be in such a rush. I know what I'm against, you know what you're against, and I think we can easily state that, but do we have to attack the phenomena?
At this stage, I think that we will conclude. I would like to thank all three panelists for a very, very important event today. Thank you.